Into what is, I've heard a number of passages referred to as I've studied through this. I've heard a number of passages referred to as the hardest passage in the Bible or in the book. And as I studied this week, that same thing was said about Revelation chapter 17. So, just trying to prep you. But last week we came to the end of the bowl judgments. We're studying the bowl judgments, those 7 bowl judgments, and I gave you my view to try to help you understand why I'm looking at them in a future sense. There's a number of different perspectives. But what's clear is when you come to the end of those bowl judgments, you come to the end of the world as we know it and understand it. The final judgment is there. Cataclysmic realities, final judgment, right? Like God is bringing things to an end. And so today, as we look at Revelation 17, you might think, well, we're just going to continue on with that final end. But John does something. He's done this a number of times through the book, through the letter. He recapitulates, he rewinds a little bit, and he allows you to begin to see the same scene from a slightly different perspective. And so last week, as we were looking at the bowl judgments, we were getting a heavenly view of God's judgment, of God's wrath being poured out on the creation, on the world of sinful people and his enemy, the devil. And anyway, so today we're going to get it in a slightly different view. And so I want to provide some of the same thoughts before we jump into it. I want to warn you, just like I did last week, that these images can be very grim. And at first read, as we work through it, maybe even at third or fourth, maybe fifth read, as we read through it, it's pretty grim. And it's like, man, what are we celebrating here, right? And so these are heavy. But I want to remind you that these are necessary realities. We've said this a number of times, that there is no victory that God has in this world without defeat of his enemies. So we have to see that. To understand the victory that's coming, we have to see the reality of the defeat that's also coming. And so I just want to remind you that these were given not so that we would wallow in the difficult things that happen, but that we could be blessed to know that God wins, that he is victorious. But also that we would be blessed to be prepared for it, to be able to be equipped, if you will, to endure patiently, which is a theme that runs all the way through the book of Revelation from start to finish, that as God's people, as his witnesses, we are to endure patiently as he does his work. And so I want to prep you for that. But I also want to prep you with the idea, again, these are difficult to interpret. Last week, I think it was that I mentioned there were some 50-some interpretations over one of the bowls. I didn't go finding or counting how many interpretations of this chapter there are, but there's more than we're going to try to cover in this setting. What I am going to tell you, as much as is possible today, I'm going to do my very best to not get off into the weeds too much, to allow us to see the imagery. It's apocalyptic imagery. It's heavenly vision. There's a lot of symbology. It's like going back into the Old Testament and reading some of the prophets. You go read Ezekiel. You go read Daniel. And then there's a lot of images that people were trying to dogmatically assert, this is what it means. And they missed their Messiah, because they were so certain they knew exactly what was going to happen. So we need to be careful. We need to be purposeful and intentional. They were given to us for a reason, these images, but we don't want to get so dogmatic that we miss the main point. So I want to work very hard to try to stay to that purpose, to get the main point of what these visions draw us to and not get off into the weeds of the many different ways that we could. There's a bunch. So just that's where we're headed, right? So, and I've sought to just highlight the fact that this chapter focuses on the prostitute, the beast, and the lamb. That's the whole focus, and we're going to see that repeatedly through this study. So Revelation 17, we're going to read the whole thing. We will pray, and then we will dig into it and see what the Lord has. So beginning in verse 1 of chapter 17. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose of whose sexual immorality, man, I need to start that again. With whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk. And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled greatly. But the angel said to me, why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. There are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. One is, the other has not yet come. And when he does, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not and is, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7 and it goes to destruction. And the 10 horns received royal power. But they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful. And the angel said to me, the waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. Let's pray. Well, Father, these are your words. This is your revelation to your people. We affirm that, and we long to know and to understand and to have the wisdom to not just see it and know it, but to apply it, to live in light of it. So meet with us today, Spirit. Guide us into truth. Guard us against preconceived notions or presumptions or being so dogmatic about things that, well, it's impossible to be dogmatic about it. So help, I pray. Be with us, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, I'll never forget standing at the top of the Willis Tower. It used to be the Sears Tower, for those of you that didn't know it changed, right? But I'm standing at the top of that tower. We had gone to Chicago as a family and went on a tour and got to go to the top. Many of you have been there. You know, they got the floors that you can step out on, look down the side of the building and see the cityscape. And I was struck as I walked around that thing and stood out in that glass box on the side of it. I was struck with this feeling. It surprised me that I felt this way, but it was the same exact sense of awe, the same sense of astonishment that I feel every time I'm in the mountains. So I don't know if you're a mountain person, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You look out and you see the peaks with the snow and they're so big, they're so massive, and you think that those things melt like wax before the Lord, and I'm so small, and then even just the reality of the power and the majestic sense that is established while I'm there. And I was standing there looking at this city built by people and feeling that same sense of awe. And I began to question myself, why would you do that? Why would you even why would that happen? And I started to think about it, and I mean, it really bothered me. I don't know how to describe the tension that's within me as I'm looking at this. But as I began to think about it, I thought, there's a way in which that even as a fallen being, even as a fallen people, sinful people can't help exemplify or point to the glory of God. Because as majestic, as much power was exerted on the creation to build a city that doesn't just extend into the sky. If you've been on the tour of Chicago, you find out that it actually extends well below, and there's a massive city underneath the city. It's shocking to find the things that are above and beyond, that are above and below the land. And it's shocking to think that people were able to figure these things out and to exercise this kind of power to build towers that reach into the sky that don't fall over when the wind blows. And I'm moved by that. But what I really realized in the middle of that and wrestling with it was that the thing that moved me was the fact that though it was amazing what people could do, what's really amazing is what the one that created the people could do. Right? It's one thing to put up a building. It's another thing to create from dust the ones who can use the ingenuity and exercise the power to put up the building. One is far more glorious than the other. And so I stood there on top of this tower, on top of this skyscraper, praising God. It was emotional. I'm not trying to play like I was weepy because of it. It was shocking again. But as I read this passage this week, I think that's exactly what John was kind of wrestling with. Because he's introduced to this vision that makes him marvel. But why would he marvel? That's the whole question that the angel asked. Why would you marvel at this thing? So here he is, marveling at what really is a vile image. But here's what I think the whole point of this passage is, and we're gonna break this out. We're gonna dig into this all the way through. But I just want to guard us and to really recognize what I think this whole chapter is shared with us for is to demonstrate the glory of God and His Lamb. God and the Lamb are greater and more glorious than the prostitute and the beast. So we marvel at the one who is truly worthy. God and the Lamb are greater and more glorious than the prostitute and the beast. So we marvel at the one who is truly worthy. There's nothing counterfeit about God. There's no facade. There's no veneer. And here's what was shocking. As I stood there, some of the thoughts that came to mind as I stood there looking out over this city, I realized at the vantage point of the heights of that tower, I'm looking down and seeing it from a distance. But I'm getting a veneer of a view of what's really happening in Chicago, right? Like I'm able to step back and see the skyline or the cityscape, but I'm disconnected from and distant from the reality that it is a city filled with worldly pleasure. You have everything from the magnificent mile that boast fine dining and luxury hotels and shopping of the most expensive things, right? Right alongside extreme gang violence and some of the highest homicide rates in the nation. On one of our trips to Chicago, we accidentally ended up in the south side of Chicago, and people were like, "You went where?" We didn't know any better. We were on a train. We were just trying to find a subway. And we did. But the reality is if you look close enough, the majesty, the beauty of what's in Chicago really fades. Because what's really true is what's inside the city. So John is faced with that. He sees this woman. He sees this beast. He sees these things that cause him to marvel. But he's confronted with the reality that they are all just a facade, that they are all just a veneer. They are counterfeit. So here, let's just walk through it, the vision that was presented to him. So one of the angels, so we're going to kind of walk through this in a systematic way. One of the angels that had just poured out one of the bowls comes to him and says, "Hey, I'm going to show you the judgment of the great prostitute." Now, this is a format that we've seen happen repeatedly as we've walked through the book of Revelation. So John hears something, he's told something, and then he's shown something. And those two things are always the same thing, but the nuanced perspective that we find teaches us something about them. So he is told, hey, come on, I'm going to show you this thing, this judgment, right? And then he's going to be shown what he's told about. That happened in Revelation 5 when he hears the Lion of Judah, the root of David, and he turns and he sees the Lamb coming out from the throne. It happened when he heard the number of the 144,000 and he turns and he sees a multitude. There's a way in which these complementary revelations or complementary visions help us understand. So what did John hear? He heard from the angel about judgment. Pretty straightforward, right? Judgment. We've just studied judgment, the bowls of judgment. He knows what it is. He's been hearing about the cycles of judgment, the seal judgments, the trumpet judgments, the bowl judgments. And now he's coming and this angel is going to rewind a little bit from the final judgment, rewind a little bit and say, hey, I'm going to show you another view. So he takes John to the wilderness and he's going to see this judgment. Well, what the judgment of what? The great prostitute. And over through these first 6 verses, we find mention of sexual immorality and the ways in which this prostitute seduces and entices, and leads even the authorities and the powers that be in the world into this seductive life in which she feeds on them and consumes them. It talks about the kings of the earth. We're going to show you the judgment of this great prostitute that seduces the kings of the earth and the judgment that's going to come on her. And not just that, but he hears that he's going to learn about these dwellers of the earth who have been seduced by the great prostitute. So the angel brings him out in verse 3. The angel brings him out to the wilderness. He goes out into the wilderness, and this is what I saw. So John hears the judgment, the great prostitute, the kings, the dwellers on the earth, and then he sees a woman sitting on a beast. Right? We don't see him immediately seeing these vast multitudes of people. We don't see him immediately looking and seeing the kings of the earth. He sees a woman and a beast. And the woman is arrayed in purple and this fine clothing, right? Like the imagery of her clothing is to demonstrate luxury and lavish lifestyles. She's bedazzled, right? Like she's got jewels just hanging off of her. She is resplendent, if you will. She's adorned with gold and jewels and pearls. And she's sitting on a beast. And immediately, when he introduces this first beast, his readers are going to recognize it. It's a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. Wait a minute. We've heard of that beast. We just read about that beast. We just studied that beast. Revelation 13, you can go back and you can see it. This is the first beast, the Antichrist, the one who's going to be empowered by the enemy, by Satan, the dragon, to make war against God's people. And so somehow this union between the woman and the beast represent this vile union. It's actually, we're going to see this play out in the weeks to come, but it actually seems to be a counterfeit of Christ and his bride. So the bride is pure. She's undefiled. This woman's not even worth marrying. She's a prostitute. Right? It's not a union that's eternal, or it's not a union that's binding. It's a union of convenience. It's somebody you want to take advantage of for your own purpose, but not be beneficial to you. It's someone who wants to take advantage of you, but not provide you a blessing in that partnership. And here we have it. And at this point, most of the attention in the passage is given to this woman. And she's called Babylon. In fact, it says it, right? So when I saw her, I'm sorry, back up just a little bit. The beast is full of covered with names, full of abominations, impurity. Come on, Seth, get the right verse. Here we go. Here we go. So the beast has names that are blasphemous. The woman is arrayed in purple, scarlet, adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. So she's got this image of resplendence and glory. She is showing herself to be all that much of the world would long to be, but this golden cup that she drinks from is full of nothing worth drinking. On her forehead is written a name of mystery, something that must be revealed. It's not a puzzle that has to be figured out. It's not like we're detectives being told, oh, go and find the code and figure these things out. This is in Revelation, the word mystery isn't a puzzle that you're giving clues to that you're supposed to follow the breadcrumbs and figure out. The word mystery is intended to show something that must be revealed if you're going to understand it. So we wouldn't know who this woman was. All we would get is a picture of her if this mystery, if this name that is a mystery that's being revealed to us weren't told. Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. She's called Babylon. Now, if you know anything about the Bible, you know Babylon is not a great place. It's a place that's wicked. It's a city of man. It's a city given to destruction. It's a place that stood against God. It oppressed God's people. Not because she's literally the city of Babylon. This is symbolic language. It's drawing our attention to who Babylon was in the history of redemption. The name identifies her as having some level of greatness, right? She is the great prostitute. It's the great city. People are drawn to this place, and they're ruled by it. They're wooed by it and then consumed by it. She represents the religious, economic, and cultural systems of the world. She entices people by drawing on their fleshly desires. I wanted to read and pray through Ephesians 2, 1 through 3 this morning because I think that's exactly what Paul's getting at in that passage. Because there were people who were bound by the course of the world, who were given to it by the influence of world religions, the influence of cultural systems, the influence of economic power and what money and gold and treasure can seemingly provide. So the world uses these things, and they're enticed by these things, and they're driven to these things, and eventually they lead to destruction. But we can't blame it all on her because we're enticed in our flesh by them. Can't just blame it on, oh, it's the world, they're the problem. Because the passions of our flesh are given to these things. She entices with them. This woman sitting on the beast, it demonstrates a union of sorts. The intention is to see they're working together. Now, there's some that I've read from that want to say, oh, well, here's the thing, is that this is about the woman ruling over the beast, or the beast controlling the woman. And I would suggest that to some degree or other, they both think that they're in charge. When you ride on a horse, you think you're guiding its way. And you're only doing that if it's a tamed and trained horse, right? I'm suggesting this beast is not tamed nor trained. But how foolish we are sometimes to think that we can play with sin, that we can have our pet sin, that we can give in to the passions of the flesh and just, oh, it's just a little kitty. It's my cat. Don't worry about my cat here. Right, this is my pet. No, you can't touch my pet. You can't. I'm going to care for this over here. It's not affecting you any. Just leave my pet alone. Only to find out that it is a ferocious lion that will consume you at its first opportunity. How many people do you know that have thought that I can toy with this thing, whose lives have been consumed by the evil that's behind it? The scene is marked with depravity. The cup is full of abominations and impurities or sexual immorality. Mention after mention of sexual immorality, which likely in Revelation is not so much just pure sexual immorality, but is as much about idolatry and giving into the pursuit of and the commitment to, the devotion to other gods. Repeatedly through the Old Testament, Israel is mentioned as an adulterous nation, not because they're simply having always involved in sexual immorality, but because they are running after the gods of other nations. So there's a reality that this is probably as much about idolatry as it is sexual immorality. And sexual immorality, if we really get to the bottom of it, is really just about idolatry, because we're going to do what we're going to do. We're going to be our own God. We're going to do our own thing. And hey, you stay out of it. This is my life. But here's John seeing it, and he marvels. Now some, when they look at this, and they look at it in verse 6, it says, when I saw her, I marveled greatly. Again, I want you to recognize, this is not some small reaction. This is a big deal. I marveled greatly. And some want to say, oh, well, they want to protect John, right? They wanted to show John to be the great noble man that he is. I mean, he's used of God to reveal to us what's going to happen. And so they want to protect him. Oh, it's about fear and disgust. And he is marveling in fear and disgust. And I don't believe that's true. I think the popular view, and probably the right view, is that he is marveling because though the scene is marked with all kinds of depravity, and it's really vile, there's a part of him that's drawn to it. And here's why I think that. Because just a couple verses later in verse 8, the beast that you saw was and is not and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth whose names have not been written in the book of life. What do? They marvel. They marvel. It's the same exact word. They will marvel at this beast. So I think what John is doing is responding in some sense, and I'm not trying to be down on him, I'm not trying to beat him up too much. I just think the reality is that he is marveling because his flesh is enticed. And there's another reason, just one other example of why I would suggest that. Because the angel's response. He doesn't walk up to him and say, hey, John, man, keep marveling, but let me help you out here. The question is almost a gentle rebuke. It's a gentle correction. Why do you marvel? In another example, when John is weeping in chapter 5, when we go to chapter 5, he is weeping, just distraught that there is no one worthy to open the seals. And when the elder comes to him, he doesn't say, stop. Why are you weeping? Because the reality is this is a reason to weep. If there's no one worthy to open the scroll, if there's no one worthy to break the seals, we should all be weeping. He doesn't say, why are you weeping? He comes to him, he says, weep no more. There's reason to weep no more. So stop weeping because here he is, the Lion of Judah, the root of David. And John turns and he sees the Lamb who was slain standing in the throne. But here the angel is like, wait, John, why are you marveling? The dwellers on the earth whose names have never been written in the Lamb's book of life, they marvel. Why would you marvel? But before we get too down on John, I want us to remember all live in this place. Let's not pretend that we're more noble than John. That we aren't subject to the allure and enticing nature of the world we live in. I thought about this quite a bit as I was reading and studying. I've been in Revelation for a couple of years studying it, but this week as I really focused on this passage, I couldn't help but how easily deceived we can be. And I thought about the woman from Proverbs 5 that the father is warning his son against. I didn't put the verses on the screen. Let me just read them to you. Let's listen. For the lips of a forbidden woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. If we just stop there, oh man, forbidden woman? Oh yeah, let's have that. Honey? Smoother than oil? That sounds great. Verse 4, but in the end, she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps follow the path to Sheol. She does not ponder the path of life. Her ways wander, and she does not know it. She doesn't even know it. She's confused by it. She's deceived. She's consumed by her lies and her lusts. And everyone who listens to that voice, the same thing happens. Reading from Vern Pothras as I've been working through preparing sermons. He's got a great little devotional kind of book that goes along with this. And something he wrote struck me. He writes, seduction arises not only outside the church. No, it doesn't surprise us when we walk into the world and they're enticed and seduced and drawn in, right? That's who they are. Seduction arises not only outside the church. People who claim to be Christians try to convince us that compromise with worldly idolatry is really okay. There's a syncretistic idea that many Christians will espouse. Thus, in our day, seduction comes not only from TV advertisements that promote materialism, but also from false religious teachers. Theological liberalism intends to make peace with the modern world. Health and wealth theology claims that we can be rich and healthy if only we follow the right recipes. The shallow pastor or counselor offers self-help pop psychology rather than the message of sin and redemption as the remedy for our frustrations. And I couldn't help but think on this quote as we were singing that song, I just need Jesus. But there's this idea that we need the gospel plus something else. We need the gospel plus this thing. We need the gospel plus this thing. That this or that added to the gospel make for the right solution to see God's kingdom come. That is a lie. But we can be so easily deceived by the bigness of the show. The excellence of production value, the size of the crowd that gathers. Don't misunderstand. Those things in and of themselves shouldn't be thrown out. The bigness of the show, there's nothing wrong with seeking excellent production value. There's nothing wrong with demonstrating the beauty and the majesty of God through doing all that we can to demonstrate His glory, meeting people right where they are so that they see something more. Just a word about that. Look at the lengths he went to in Revelation to depict the story of all of time. This is a pretty big show. And if we put the effort to it to understand it, now I would suggest that the production value is above all others. Right? Like there is a way in which he has guarded the scripture from start to finish that we could understand, that we could know, that would be in a language that we could discern, in an image even that we could look at and see with our own eyes as we hear about it. The problem becomes when we begin to look at those things as the valuable thing, as the certain thing, as the substance of the thing. So if a teacher has a large following, we listen just a little less critically. If they're able to put on an extremely good and entertaining show, we don't look quite as close at the substance that the show is pointing us to. And it's always easier to run with the crowd than to stand by yourself in the midst of it. Right? We can be deceived by the idols of our own heart, the false sense of security, because who doesn't want to feel safe? That's not my leading thing, but oh man, I recognize that. And for some of you, it is your leading thing. I just want to feel safe. I want security. I want to be certain. The feelings of control and power, like, I got a plan and I'm going to make that plan work. Yeah, you keep believing that. And then come to me and talk to me about not planning anything, and I'll make you mad because I'm the other extreme. But the number of times I talk with people that they're frustrated because their plans didn't go to plan, it's almost every week. Just saying. Feelings of comfort. But who hasn't believed, who hasn't accidentally begun to be enticed by the fact that if I just have enough money, if I just have the right relationships, if I just have the right circumstances, if I just figure out how to get rid of the toxicity in my life, then suddenly everything's going to be okay. You heard it. Get rid of the toxic people. I like to say this. I like to use this one because I think realistically that means you got to get rid of yourself too, right? Because you're as toxic as everybody else is. I'm as toxic as you are. We are as toxic as they are. It's all the same. The only difference is that we have Jesus to heal us and cleanse us of all that toxicity. We can be deceived. We get deceived, right? Like there's a way in which we are enticed by these things, just like anyone else. We see the pretty packaging. We listen to the empty promises. We look at the counterfeit examples and we think, oh, that's it. This or that. I don't know. You fill in the blank. That's going to scratch my eternal itch. Finally, I'm going to find the relief I long for. God and the Lamb are greater and more glorious than the prostitute and the beast. So we marvel at the one who is truly worthy. We need this chapter to be in the Bible because we, like John, can marvel at all the wrong things. And we need to be shown the truth that only God is great and only God is glorious. And everything else is a pitiful, empty counterfeit. And we just see that. So here's what he sees it, he hears it, and then the angel says, hey, John, why are you marveling? Let me show you. Let me reveal to you what you don't understand just yet. And so he begins to reveal it to him. And he tells him, hey, this is going to take wisdom. Right? So let's not run without wisdom. Let's just eject it all. Let's not try to apply some understanding and some discernment as we look at this. This is going to take wisdom. But here's what people do. As soon as they see that, they hear the word mystery when it refers to the woman and her name. They hear the word mystery when they see it referred here to the angel. Let me reveal this mystery. And you know what they do immediately? They begin to break out their charts and their graphs. And I know I've shown my charts and graphs, and I get the irony of what I'm saying. But they break out their charts and the graphs, and they start trying to define specifically who each of these people or creatures are. And I think that misses the point. So you got people that are running around out there saying, oh, it's these empires. The beast is these empires that have been reigning, and here's the empire that he's referring to now, which probably in John's reader's mind, they were thinking about Rome because of the 7 hills and all of that. But if he had meant them specifically, and he wasn't using them as some symbolic representation, then who are the ones that follow? What are the empires that exist over the last 1900-ish years that now we're supposed to discern are the last 2? And oh, by the way, the beast is the 8th. And how are we supposed to figure that out? But people are doing it. They've gone through history and they said, oh, this is it. Here's what it is. And there was a point where as the European Union was being formed, before it was the European Union, I heard this, I think it was from Sam Storms. As the European Union was being formed, before it was called the European Union, it was called something else, but there was like 8 nations that joined, and then there was 9, and then there was 10, and people were like, oh, there's the 10, that's the empire, that's the ones. Well, wait a minute, now there's like 27. So are they still, are they not, are we wrong, what do we... The empire thing doesn't work out great because nobody agrees about what empires it's supposed to represent. So some have then said, well, what really is happening is he's talking about emperors. And there's 7, these 7 hills, there are also 7 kings, and it's emperors they're talking about. And so what they've done, and then you can go out and find, I don't know, probably, I found 5 this week easily without looking hard. I found 5 different lists of emperors' names, of people that are supposed to be representative of this beast. And You know what's shocking to me is that none of them agree. I would think that this mystery that the angel is revealing is intended to actually reveal something substantial and substantive, certain to us, not something that leads us down a rabbit hole of trying to decide, is it these 7 emperors followed by, wait a minute, these didn't have a very long reign, so we can't count them, so that they're out, so now we're going to draw this one in and displace these others, so that's 7. I like the way that looks. The angel is about to reveal to John what he needs to know so that he won't be enticed and marvel at the wrong thing. So that he can marvel at the greatness and the glory of God and the Lamb. And that's exactly what he does. And what's he reveal? What's the mystery he reveals? Well, the mystery he reveals is first that the beast is counterfeit. Look at how he introduces the beast who was and is not and is about to rise from the bottomless pit. And then later, and I think it's in verse 11, he says, as for the beast that was and is not and is about to be, as for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. So there's this beast that has this seemingly eternal nature that's not really eternal because he's not always here. But the language models and mimics the same claim that God has made. I'm the God who was, God who is, and the God who will be. We've seen that name over and over. We've seen that reference over and over as we've studied Revelation. When we started this whole series that gave us the title for the whole series, Alpha and Omega, God from beginning to end, we studied each of those statements, God demonstrating himself to be God from first to last, before we ran all the way back to creation to see him God as the Alpha. So that we could work through the whole Bible to come to this place where we see God as the Omega, the one who brings it all to a close. He's the God who always is, always has been, and always will be, but this beast is being presented as a counterfeit. It's indicative of everything the devil has done. Everything that evil works it's an empty counterfeit. The beast is a counterfeit. The beast will be worshipped. Look at in verse 9 and 12. He goes about this way in which he's going to show this power, this presence among the people. He's 7 heads and 7 mountains, right? And what are the people going to do? They're going to marvel. They're going to worship him. They're going to look at him and be enticed and subdued and consumed. And think about how that works out. Now, again, I think probably John's readers in their mind immediately were thinking of Rome. They're thinking of Rome, and this woman has been called Babylon, and I think what the intent for us to see here is not that they are literally Rome or Babylon, but they represent, across time, the city of man. This is a theme that exists across the whole Scripture. It goes all the way back. You can count it all the way back to Cain. He kills his brother. He is cursed by God. In fact, he's the first person in the Bible who God actually says, my curse is on you. He didn't even say that to Adam and Eve directly, but he directly says, you're cursed. And Cain is like, whoa, hey, that's too much. I'm going to be a wanderer. I'm not going to have a place to stay. I'm not going to have a home. And so what does he do? He goes and he builds a city. I'll show you, God. I'm going to have a home. I'm going to have a place. I'm going to make a name. And you can follow that city of man line. You can follow that thinking to Genesis chapter 11, where they have been commanded after coming out of the ark to go and spread out all over the earth. And what do? They form a city. And hey, by the way, while we're here, let's just go ahead and build a big tower that we can stand on and look down on the earth and think we're really great. Now, I don't know that they really thought that, but they wanted to make a name for themselves. Right? Follow that forward a little bit. There's a number of stops you can make, but Babylon's in there. Nineveh. God sends Jonah to Nineveh, this great city. Why? To call them to repent. Here's what's happening. Here's what happens is people run to these cities thinking they are the solution, that they are the source of life, that they are the ones, and bring them power and give them the ability to manage life and overcome the curse and to live in such a way that they are not bothered with God but can be their own God. And they can define things on their own terms. And this city is going to be mesmerized by the woman and the beast, the city of man. And what's going to end up happening is they're going to give themselves in devotion to it. I love this note out of the ESV Study Bible. Pleasure-addicted society conspires with the power-addicted state to silence the testimony of Jesus' witness by putting them to death because they are consumed with living in the city of man rather than looking for the city that comes out of the clouds when Jesus returns. They worship it. They marvel at it. They are inspired by it. They're given to it, and they will not denounce it. We see again that the mystery revealed is that the beast is counterfeit. The beast will be worshipped, and the beast will war against the Lamb. He's going to war against the Lamb. I mean, who in their right mind goes to war against the Lamb? It's a lamb, for crying out loud. But this lamb is a special lamb. He's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And how sick does it look for a beast to go to war against a lamb? The beast is going to go and start a war. And you've already heard it a couple of times as we've referenced the beast, but the beast is going to be destroyed. You see it in verses 8, verse 11, and verse 14. Verse 8, you've got this threefold phrase: the beast was and is not and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. As for the beast, in verse 11, that was and is not, it is an eighth, but it belongs to the seventh, and it goes to destruction. And in verse 14, they will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them. The beast will war against the Lamb, but the beast will be destroyed. So why in the world would we, as God's people, marvel at anything that He intends to destroy? The beast will devour the woman. This is a shocking thing, because here it seems at the beginning of this chapter that the beast and the woman are in cahoots, that they're working together, that they support one another, that they need one another. And at the very end, in this chapter, verse 16, and the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. The union that looked so powerful, that looked so mesmerizing, is all a facade. Evil destroys evil. And why would I want to call that out? It's not simply to say, hey, look at this horrific picture. But I want you to see why it happens. They will make her desolate and naked, devour her flesh, and burn her up with fire. For God, For God has put it in their hearts to carry out His purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. Who's great? Who's glorious? Who's powerful? Who's sovereign? Who gets their way? Whose will is accomplished? Who? God's. They will only rule, they will only have influence, they will only be seducing and enticing for as long as He allows it. But when God is done, they will devour, the beast will devour the prostitute, the beast will devour the city. Satan will devour the people that took his mark and took his name, because evil always destroys evil. God and the Lamb are greater and more glorious than the prostitute and the beast, so we marvel at the one who is truly worthy. God is so great. His enemies end up doing His will. God is so great that even fallen man can't help but reflect the glory of His greatness, right? We can't help but reflect something of His glory, because in everything He is glorified. God is so glorious, only His glory will endure forever. The Lamb will conquer. He is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. There is no city worth living in contrast to the city built by God. So I think for those who are with the Lamb, and I would just draw you back to verse 14, they will make war on the Lamb, And the Lamb will conquer, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. For those with him are called and chosen and faithful. Those with him are called. Think back. Those whom my Father calls will come. They're chosen. They're elect. It's not just that we chose God. That in somehow, some way, before we could ever do the choosing, he did the choosing. He's chosen it. You didn't choose me. I chose you, Jesus says to his apostles. Faithful. The word indicates that there's a faith that they trust the Lord, but it indicates that there's a continuing faith, a perseverance in faith. And so I think Jesus' warning, Jesus' reminder from last week for those that are with the Lamb still applies. Stay awake. Our enemy is extremely crafty and is really good at doing what he does. He will entice you, he will deceive you, he will draw you in deep if he has his way. The pleasures and the treasures and the trappings of this world will play on every fleshly passion that you have. But they all lead to the same place. Death, judgment, destruction. So marvel at the one who gives us a way out. Stay awake. Keep your clothes on. I don't know, this just popped in my head. Just keep your clothes on. Stay away from the prostitute. Okay? All right, let's pray.